Everyone. This is the Community and Economic Development Committee, and it is 1:30, so we're going to start. And I see one of my council members coming down from the stairs. But before we begin, I want to remind the committee members and members of the public to follow our code of conduct at meetings. This includes commenting on the specific item only and addressing the full body. Public speakers will not engage in a conversation with the council members or staff. All members of the committee, staff, and the public are expected to refrain from abusive language. Repeated failure to comply with the code of conduct which will disrupt, or impede the orderly conduct of this meeting may result in the removal from this meeting. This meeting of the CED committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Batra?
Present.
Ortiz?
Present.
Kamei? Torres?
Present.
And Foley.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have moving through the agenda, we have nothing to review on the work plan, and we do not have a consent calendar. So we will move to our first report from the committee, which is the Real Estate Services Division Activities Annual Report. And I believe Kevin's coming down, so I believe Kevin's making the presentation.
Good afternoon, committee, council members. I'm Kevin Ice, Senior Real Estate Manager for the city, overseeing the Real Estate Services Division. And today I'm going to present our annual update on division activities. Real Estate Services supports departments citywide in effectuating real estate transactional work, including property acquisitions, dispositions, easements, leases, property management, as both landlord and tenant, and representing the city in negotiation for any real estate actions. The division focuses on managing the city's facilities and overseeing revenue generation, in addition to real estate project tasks. Total revenue for the year was $3,344,000, inclusive of facility and telecommunication leases and surplus sales. The division completed 154 total real estate projects, serving our client departments. And in the audience, I'm joined by our project managers. So Thomas Harris, Yen Bui, and starting today, very, very happy to say, Mike Wren in the audience. Departments served include housing, parks, public works, environmental services, transportation, police, fire, the attorney's office, and other city manager or citywide projects. All revenue and project accomplishment metrics exceeded the division's performance targets for fiscal year 22-23. There we go. Breaking down revenue generated, for surplus sales, there was $722,000 that was primarily derived by the sale of the city's condo in the Ryland Mews complex. This number exceeded the revenue target of $600,000. Facility lease revenue totaled $1,096,000, exceeding the revenue target of $1 million. The year saw a challenge with the Flames business shutting down after the COVID pandemic disrupted the business. However, Council recently approved a lease agreement with the business to replace Flames at a rate that is 88% higher than the Flames lease. In the year, however, other businesses were able to make progress against paying back unpaid rent that was accrued during the pandemic. In particular, Circle A Skateboards sold their business and the lease to Campus Burgers, and in the process, paid off a significant past due rental balance in full. Going forward, we expect future fiscal years to be more normalized as we progress past the impacts of the COVID pandemic. Telecommunication leasing increased significantly this year, bringing in $1,524,000, which was $345,000 over the revenue from the previous fiscal year. This exceeds the target of $1,400,000. The increase was primarily the result of establishing a relationship with Boost Mobile, which is owned by Dish Wireless. The merger of Sprint and T-Mobile had negatively impacted our telecommunication program, as those companies both had installations at different city facilities, and T-Mobile has been terminating duplicate leases as they're able to. But the partnership with Boost has proven beneficial as they've moved into the space vacated by T-Mobile and are now looking to expand beyond that, and this has shorn up our telco leasing revenues. Real estate has also been working to procure a land and property management database platform that will be used to complete our audit requirements focused on reporting, including for vacant land management reporting. This procurement process is in final stages, and we expect to begin database build-out this quarter. Now we'll turn to a few project highlights from fiscal year 22-23. For the housing department, we acquired the Arena Hotel, funded by Project Homekey. We executed a lease for a safe parking facility at 1300 Berryessa, and we executed a lease for the Eviction Help Center located on Santee Drive. For the Parks Department, we processed a few park and trail dedications, including Delano Manongs, Golden Oak Park off of Great Oaks Boulevard, and the Flea Market Trail dedication. We completed a lease with Coursco for the operation of the city's 3 municipal golf courses. And then I wanted to highlight a relatively small trail easement that normally wouldn't get flagged in a presentation like this that we acquired from the Della Maggiore family. The easement had been a holdout from the Coyote Creek trail system, and acquiring it completed the city's unbroken rights to a larger section of Coyote Creek Trail that now allows construction of that larger portion of Coyote Creek Trail to progress. For public safety projects, we completed a lease with the San Jose Giants to allow fire training cadets to use the Giants clubhouse. This allowed the fire department to hold an academy while their training facility was still being constructed. We completed leases for the police department, including for a community policing center at the Oak Ridge Mall, and we acquired land needed to construct Fire Station 36, which is a Measure T project. For the Department of Transportation, in addition to our typical right-of-way project support, we're focused on supporting efforts to construct parking near the SAP Center, including on the Milligan property and the future Lot E parking lot. For Lot E, we completed the acquisition of 517 West St. John Street at the corner of West St. John and Autumn, and the council recently approved a resolution of necessity to acquire 150 North Montgomery. And rounding out our project highlights for the year is work done for the Environmental Services Department, including 2 new leases to temporarily house municipal water while their permanent home is being reconstructed, and lease agreements for the Environmental Innovation Center. Citywide objectives included supporting the acquisition of the Cesar Chavez Family House by a nonprofit organization. The city provided funding assistance, and we put a stipulation on the property that it must always remain available to the public. We also overhauled Council Policy 713 and Municipal Code 420. This satisfied a recommendation of the Real Estate Services Audit. It ensures that our policies and practices are consistent with state surplus law, and it makes our work more efficient. And that concludes the annual Real Estate Services Division update. Our recommendation is simply to accept staff's status report, and we're available for any questions that the committee has. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Let's go to members of the public.
We have no hands raised or cards submitted. Back to the committee.
Okay, then I'll go to the committee, and I think I saw that Councilmember Ortiz asked to speak.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our staff for this report. I appreciate seeing the effective work of our real estate division in managing our city's property portfolio. This report does have me thinking, and I don't know if this conversation has been brought up before, but how can we potentially use this real estate activity to better shape land use and build stronger communities in some of our most under-resourced neighborhoods? I wanted to ask if the City Council provided adequate funding, could we potentially utilize the real estate division to buy and lease property to maybe, for example, bring a grocery store to a food desert?
Nancy Klein, Economic Development and Cultural Affairs. Madam Chair and members of the council, we would love to take a look at that. We know there are food deserts. Right now, just to be clear-eyed about the opportunity, is there the economics of markets are really tough. So we would want to check in first in key areas and then let you know if it would be successful, likely, or not, without ongoing incentives, which is something we wouldn't try to recommend.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. You know, we all have, you know, empty store fronts, empty vacant buildings in our districts. I got the Orchard Supply and Hardware in the Alum Rock Village, which has been an eyesore and a burden. So I'm just thinking, how can our city be innovative and maybe bring resources into some of these neighborhoods? Outside of the economy, is there any other barriers that exist to participating in land banking?
We love land banking. We tried to get the redevelopment agency to do some land banking activities, and for a variety of reasons that was not supported. Our city, as you well know, has so little land compared to even Mountain View or Sunnyvale, despite our size differences. So from our point of view, if someone proposed to buy Singleton, I think we should turn that down, because I think now and into the future, as an example, there are a lot of ways that the city could benefit by retaining ownership and putting it into use. And any opportunity to expand the city's holdings would be good. It comes with maintenance responsibilities, carry costs, but.
Okay, well, thank you. I look forward to more conversations on that topic.
Councilmember, would you like to move acceptance of the report?
Yes, I would now like to remove item D1.
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Torres.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Kevin, for for that presentation. I know that you're very responsive as the council member for downtown. A lot of the property that we do own is in downtown. And with that, there is, I know we just secured a tenant at the old Flames location. I used to be a member of Premier Credit Union. It was called San José Credit Union, and now it's called Premier Credit Union, right? Not to be confused to Premier Recycling, which is so weird, right? But Premier Credit Union, right? And now that spot has been vacant. Wow, that's pretty loud. That spot has been vacant for, I think, almost 4 years already. I think they left right before the pandemic. And so it's been open, it's been empty for about 4 years. How do we advertise to folks our vacant spaces? Is there a website? Is there an Excel spreadsheet? Can they go somewhere, right? Because I know that it's, now that we are seeing a recovery from, SJSU and SJSU expanding its footprint, right? I think it's important to have businesses underneath our parking lots, right? So how do we advertise our vacant spaces?
I'm going to start out and then I'll turn it over to Kevin. So we have been working very closely with Public Works. We have a high demand for additional space within City Hall. So that space and adjacent space, I believe you'll see city departments utilizing those spaces. The timing of that, I'm not exactly sure, but that's why we haven't been more aggressive to put retail uses in that particular space.
And then to address the bigger question of how we list our spaces, we do so through CoStar and list our available spaces for rent through CoStar and LoopNet. That's how we marketed the Flames space. And we are looking to list here very soon the former FedEx space.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. So I would recommend that we work with, I know that we have an aggressive pop-up program when it comes to vacant storefronts on the Paseo. And I know that it's for me, it's really important not to see vacant storefronts. And so, if we're in limbo or there's a plan, we all know, we're all part of the same team, right? For something to get going in the city of San Jose, it takes 6 votes, right? And then other things, right? But lease agreements takes months. I think that if when we own the building and we have full control of the facility, I think we really do need to start working with pop-up organizations to be in there for 2-3 months, right? Because I know, a lot of these local entrepreneurs are pop-ups already, right? I can name you a bunch of organizations that work with pop-up vendors who have their business tax license, who have their county permits, right? We don't want folks who are, going through the process or are, unfortunately unpermitted, right? But if we work with pop-up organizations who have vendors who are permitted, right? I think we, let's put tape on the floor and they can come in and sell jewelry or clothes or shirts or hats, right? Because we don't have to get food vendors in there, right? We can get merchandise or crafts in there, right? So that's my 2 cents. So.
Thank you. We agree.
Thank you. Yesterday, I was down here seeing a show at the Hammer Theater, and it was a matinee, and then we wanted to go to dinner. It was around 4 o'clock, a little bit early for dinner, but we wandered around, and it was really sad to see so many vacancies. We ended up at Scott's because other places weren't open that early, and had a lovely meal. It was wonderful. So if you're ever downtown, go down and please participate in any restaurant that's open and available at the time. But it was sad to see so many vacancies. So I'm wondering, I don't know which ones are city-owned properties and which ones are owned by a third party. I know you must have a list. Is it possible, would it be beneficial, or could you generate a list for council to take a look at, just in case we come across someone who has a 90-day need for a pop-up during Christmas or something like that, that we could then say, hey, talk to this property is available and talk to you. Is that hard to generate? I don't want you to spend hours putting something together, but it would seem to me you might have that already easily available.
Thank you very much for the question. We can do that, and the bulk of those properties would be in the downtown. I just want to clarify, that's not talking a community center per se, but more of a commercial property.
No, I absolutely acknowledge that it would be downtown, but we want to activate our downtown, and the way we do that is by having a lot of vibrant storefronts, particularly with our San Jose State students coming in more to the South Tower. We need to be able to have restaurants, coffee shops, whatever retail that they can wander around and activate the area and also spend their dollars. So anything we can do to promote the downtown economy will actually then filter out into the other parts of our districts, as well as we get eyes on the city and people start thinking, oh yeah, San Jose is where I want to go. Then they come here and then they look at other areas that they might want to maybe live, maybe move, maybe work. The other thing is, before I forget, I do want to thank the Maggiore family for their contribution to the Coyote Creek trail. That's really important to have that completed, so it's good work in working with them to make that happen. And finally, the other question I had is, how do we decide what properties are surplus, and how do we decide when we're going to sell those?
Surplus properties are rare, and so I'm trying to think of the last one that we have done. There's the condo.
Yeah, Kevin just mentioned the condo.
Right.
That's what made me think about it.
Yes. So the opportunity is, if we had, and we've worked with the housing department on properties for affordable housing, and that was 2 years ago, and there were 3 sites that we did. So anytime that we're first looking at how we can use our properties for affordable housing, which is also mandated by a Surplus Land Act law, but we would have done that anyway as supporting, because housing is a very important client of ours, and the goal for the city is so huge. And we just don't have a lot of land. There are other things, for example, that we'll be considering and bringing forward to you for jobs, and that OED-ECA anyway, will strongly advocate that be jobs, not housing, for a variety of reasons. But we just don't have a lot of it. So, for example, one that comes up a lot of time, just so we can dig in a quick second, Parkview and Christchurch in D3. We don't own that. We have a disposition and development on it agreement. There is a specter of us trying to do a hard thing and repurchasing it. And once, if it happened that we repurchased it, in order to then work with the next developer, that would go from a market rate, most likely, to a largely affordable, because surplus law and us touching it may not, but likely would mean that we would need to convert that to affordable, which has great aspects, and it has other considerations as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So our philosophy is, and it's a good one, is if we own real estate, to hold on to it, to see if there's a use that we can utilize this particular property, be it commercial, industrial, retail, housing, whatever the need. So owning that real estate is important, because it's so expensive for us to buy it if we wanted to. Okay, great, thank you, I appreciate that. Council Member, or Vice Mayor Kamei.
Thank you. And I apologize, I came in halfway through, so you may have covered this, but I was curious in trying to understand, when you're looking at real estate and facilities, is there a point at which you're looking at sort of an end-of-life cycle of what's there? I know that due to many different reasons, some of our facilities are have a lot of deferred maintenance. And so I was just curious, and I guess I'm thinking more in terms of some of the parking structure that, in terms of how do you also cover that area? And how do you assess when something is sort of like getting towards the end of, maybe thinking about doing something else, or either making improvements, or, because I know that our deferred maintenance is huge. And so just thinking about how do you address some of that as well?
Absolutely. Excellent question. Thank you. So we work very closely with Public Works. Walter Lynn, Deputy Director, Ryan Rucker. We look to them to advise on capital needs, maintenance needs, and life cycle for any particular structure. So we follow them, and they're good at making necessary repairs and keeping things in service. But they have advised that there's city facilities on the near-term horizon that we need to start thinking about, end of cycle. So for one particular facility that is kind of nearing that stage, we've just done a comprehensive contractor's assessment, and then that'll tell us, what'll it take to keep this in service for another, 10 years or so, or is it now time to think about what better use we could put the land to? So just taking their lead, and then, when we actually get there, it's thinking about that higher and better use.
And then also thinking, sorry, Councilmember,
No,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Also thinking about market. For example, right now would be a terrible time
Yeah.
to sell a city facility as long as it's operating and bringing in revenue.
Yeah.
So considerations about where that market level is.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not thinking so much as in terms of selling or whatever, because obviously markets are bad right now, but sort of thinking ahead and thinking about opportunities that may arise, and also if you're doing it on an annual basis where you're doing this assessment and say, well, it could hold off another 2 or 3 years or whatever it is, at least I know that there's constant monitoring, right? Because I've gone to some of the facilities that need more love, and certainly they're hanging in there, but at some point, as long as we're monitoring them, I'm okay. But when you just think, oh well, I can't think about that right now, I was just curious as to how that process works, and if Public Works is on it and they do it on an annual basis, that's fine. But I just want to make sure that that's happening, because we don't want to wait till something bad happens and it's like, oh my gosh, this thing is crumbling, and then you have to address, worse issues. So, yeah, thank you. And is it annual? Is it annual that they look? Or maybe you can get back to me or something?
It's property by property, case by case specific, where they have a sense of the condition of our facilities, and for the ones that are nearing end of life and nearing major capital investments, they take a deeper dive look at that time.
Does that come from you? Does that come from somebody else? Does that come from complaints? I mean, because I know that certain things don't happen unless they're complaint driven. And so I'm just wondering where, at what point?
Those things often converge. Well,
Okay.
they'll be getting or will be getting complaints about whether something stinks or if something isn't working. And then a conversation would ensue about, do you put short-term investment, is a short-term investment wise, or do we need to start thinking about? And honestly, there's so few properties that it's not hard to be looking at it on one page.
Okay, all right, thank you. And thank you for the report.
Thank you. Councilmember Batra.
Thank you very much for that report. I see that the total revenue which was gotten in the last year is 3.7 million, and bulk of it is from the telecommunications. Is that the towers, cell towers, or the on the electrical poles, or the real land where they build those the towers? Is it the, because when I was here last time, we were looking at getting money from the mobile phone people using our electrical poles to be able to put their small antennas. So which one is it, or if there's a breakdown?
Thank you for the question, council member. So Real Estate Services oversees what we call the macro telecommunication program, and that is different than the small cell program, which is where you can attach to an existing light pole with a smaller installation. So our macro facilities are primarily cell towers, where if we put up a cell tower, then I want to get every carrier on there, that if there's room, and get multiple leases driving revenue for us. There's also certain structures with rooftop installations as well that we manage.
Okay. So the small one, the small cells is not part of this revenue?
Public Works.
That's totally separate from that revenue. Okay, all right. Okay. And in this one, you have three different components contributing to the total revenue. One is the surplus, and the other two, if in your future report, if you separate those into a table showing the three areas where the revenue is coming or where the incoming, so that from one table we can see that information, and maybe from sales you wouldn't even have much. So it would just give us information at a glance and which side is growing or not growing, okay? So that would be more helpful in deciphering that. So,
Thank you for this. We'll do that.
okay, thank you very much, okay? Great job, keep that revenue.
Seeing no other questions, let's vote. Motion carries. Let's move on to the next report, which is Housing Department Performance Measures Audit Recommendation Number 1. This is a status report. Hi.
Hello. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Rachel Vanderveen. I'm the Assistant Director of the Housing Department, and I am joined today with two colleagues, Eric and Jennifer from the City Manager's Office. And we are here today to provide an overview of the Housing Department's work on responding to the recent performance measure audit. This is a work in progress, and we will be sharing an update on the performance measures also later in a couple of months to this committee, and then we will be bringing forward our final recommendations to the full City Council as a part of the budget process. I also want to point out that the measures discussed in the report are those that align with the Community and Economic Development Committee and the City Service Area. Oh, next slide, do you have it? Okay, thank you. Our presentation today will provide background on the audit and recommendations, provide an update on the City Service Area Performance Modernization Project, and provide a sneak peek at the proposed performance measures for the Housing Department. The audit report included 3 recommendations. We are looking forward to updating our performance measures to better align our measures with the department's most critical programs and initiatives. Today, we are going to be focusing on recommendation number 1. We want to have fewer but more relevant and meaningful measures that give policymakers and the public a clear line of sight into the housing department's performance. Our intent is to focus on measures that convey the real impact we're having on the community and de-emphasize measures that are more administrative in nature. I'll now turn the presentation over to Eric.
Thanks, Rachel. So as a reminder, we wanted to put in front of the committee the structure of the CSAs. So as the audit recommended, that we use a logic model of sorts to approach this kind of measurement. And so the layers here for the CSA that are utilized within the budget process are on the overarching side, using a mission statement to guide and direct the CSA. On the qualitative side, we characterize the CSA through outcomes, strategic goals, and then department core services. And underneath that are budget programs. On the right side, as a reminder, these are the layers of measurement that we have in the city. So on the quantitative side, really community indicators at the high level to measure our outcomes and measure impact for the CSA. CSA performance measures that help us measure how well we are delivering as a CSA. We also have core service performance measures that help us measure how well we're delivering our core services. And then last but not least, our core service outputs, which we call activity and workload highlights. Those really measure how much or scale. We did want to highlight that new to the CSA structure are these community indicators. You'll note on the left side, we kind of measure the degree of city influence over all these things. Community indicators tend to be a little bit outside of perfect control for the city, but are still important for us to measure outcomes or impact in the community, even if we don't have perfect control. In terms of the what, so the housing department has 5 different core services. 4 of those core services are represented in the Community and Economic Development CSA, and 1 of those core services is represented in the Neighborhood Services CSA. So the 5 are affordable housing portfolio management, affordable housing production and preservation, neighborhood capital investment and public services, rent stabilization and tenant protection, and then in the Neighborhood Services CSA is the Homelessness Interventions and Solutions CSA. So underneath the 4 core services in the CSA for CED, there are 13 different budget programs. Those things aren't represented here, but really span programs such as property maintenance and inspection, inclusionary housing, rehabilitation loans and grants. So the audit also encouraged us to think through different ways of evaluating what a meaningful measure is made of. And so we have defined these 5 attributes to help guide our work in terms of figuring out what is the most useful thing to be measuring here. And so the 5 attributes that we evaluated each measure on include the frequency of the measure, equity in terms of can the measure be disaggregated by some nature, credibility, scope, and finally, relevancy. And so now I will turn the presentation over to Jennifer to share the proposals.
Great, thank you, Eric. So these are our updated CED CSA mission and outcomes. The mission will read as to facilitate the equitable and focused evolution of the city in order to foster strong communities and a diverse economy with shared prosperity for all. And supporting this CSA mission are 3 outcomes. The first of which is thriving, inclusive, and attractive communities and vibrant public spaces. The second, strong, responsive, and equitable economy and development services. And the third, accessible and diverse range of housing and business opportunities. Examples of community indicators that support these outcomes include the housing cost burden and vacancy rates in our housing stock. And examples of CSA performance measures that roll up and support these outcomes include our housing production programs, housing rehabilitation, and housing stabilization programs. I won't repeat the 4 core services that Eric just covered, but those are listed here with examples of their core service performance measures and activity and workload highlights. Examples of core service performance measures include measuring our progress toward our regional housing needs allocation or RHNA goals, measuring subsidies for new construction, and eviction diversion rates. And examples of the core service activity and workload highlights include the number and affordability of units created. And I'll pass it back to Rachel.
All right, so as we look at next steps, we have 2 recommendations that we are continuing to do our work on. So we look forward to addressing recommendations 2 and 3 later this year after we've completed our work on number 1. And it's critical that our new performance measures are repeatable so we can base decisions on future reliable data, and that data can be produced quickly and without an extraordinary effort. We want to spend our time focusing on policy development and less time sorting through lots of sources of data, which is really kind of what was highlighted in the auditor's report as well, that we can create consistency across our measures, both for our performance measures in the budget, but also in other work and reports that we provide to the public and the council and other reporting agencies on a regular basis. So we will be coming back to this committee in April for updates, and we will be, like I said, our final recommendations will be a part of the budget that will be heard by the full council later in May and June. And with that, that concludes our presentation, and we are here and available for any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you for the presentation. Do we have any members of the public who'd like to comment?
We have no public comment. Back to the committee.
Okay, Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I also want to begin by thanking the Housing Department for responding to the audit recommendations so quickly and establishing some robust performance metrics for the next budget cycle. Really appreciate that important work. I'm especially excited to see the set of metrics to ensure that our programs protecting tenants are as effective as possible, including relating to the Eviction Help Center and our rent stabilization program. As homeless remains a primary issue for our residents, it's obviously vital that we strengthen, not water down, our efforts to keep our families in their homes. I do have one question on another important aspect of addressing the housing affordability crisis, which is affordable housing preservation. I see in attachment A, there's 2 items touching on preservation efforts. There's the performance measure that seems to be breaking down the percentages of units preserved by type of housing, such as senior housing or rapid rehousing, et cetera. And then there's the activity and workload highlight that tracks the number of units preserved, again, breaking it down by type. I wanted to ask, are there specific goals being set for a number of units preserved in a fiscal year?
All right, thank you, Councilmember, for the question. As we develop these measures, part of what the responsibility will be is to set targets for the measures. So that's actually part of our progression as we go through this. I understand what you're asking, like what our goals are. That is something that we have thought about as a staff and we have discussed. I'm not sure that to date broadly we have stated a goal, but we will be doing that as part of this work.
Okay, good to know. With the current policy framework, is there any idea, and if you don't have the answer, we could follow up, but what is a realistic expectation for the city, how we can expect to preserve how many units per year, regardless of the categories in which we put them in?
I'm just trying to think. Honestly, it's dependent on funding. It's dependent on how much, I guess kind of like how we put together all of these programs, and even our next item is to dig into this as well.
I got some questions on that as well.
So I guess I'm just a little hesitant to put out a number, but we do know that as we take dollars and set them aside for this activity, that's definitely going to like tie into how many units can be directly preserved. So.
Okay.
And Councilmember, I would just add, it's probably going to be very important that first we spend time establishing the baseline, figuring out where we currently are before we start deciding what targets we want to meet. So we'll spend some time figuring that out, step one. And also, as Rachel shared, you know, we have several strategies that we have to implement. They're part of the housing element. I'm sure that Kristen's going to be speaking about that. But in addition to that, so for example, we have a $5 million acquisition and rehab NOFA that just closed. And so tools like that can help us figure out what the baseline is and what targets we should be meeting each year.
Thank you. If I could add just a little bit of color to that. Kristen Clements with the Housing Department. We can talk more about preservation actually in the next item, but there are different kinds of preservation. And so one is the acquisition and rehab that Rosalind mentioned. And the housing element says we'll put out at least $5 million per year. Part of these early rounds is determining what would be, you know, how much it would cost per unit for the different kinds of buildings we'll see. So part of this is learning, and I'm sure we'll adjust targets over time. The second thing I wanted to note is that existing affordable housing that needs to be preserved, we take actions and don't necessarily put more money in order to extend the restrictions. And so it's a different kind of preservation. It would have different targets, would really be based on what deals we know are coming forward that we'll be working on and extending, or what deals have expiring restrictions in the next 10 years. So different measures.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the answers and responses. Understand that we definitely need to find out where we are and understand that baseline. But hopefully, as we move forward, we can start setting up some concrete metrics and goals for preservation. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Kamei.
Thank you, and thank you for the information. You know, I recognize that the Housing Department does many, many different things. And, you know, I was just curious, I don't know, I was glad to hear it being said that we have to establish a baseline, because I think that that's going to be critical. But I also was wondering in terms of, and maybe you don't know yet, or maybe you're still thinking about it, what indicators are you looking at? Because you do so many different things, you offer so many different things. So, you know, what may be some things that you're thinking about in terms of indicators? I'd also like to know, how are they prioritized? Because of the number of things that, you know, it's kind of grown. And of course, it's grown because we've wanted to meet the need. But, you know, when you have so many, it's hard to really figure out which is a priority. So how are they going to be prioritized? And then lastly, maybe thinking about who decides? Do you just bring a recommendation to us and then we take a look at it and you're going to give us options, or are you going to decide? So I was just kind of wondering how, and I know this is sort of in process still, but as you're thinking about it, what are the indicators, how are they prioritized, and who decides?
All right, thank you for the question. So first, regarding what are the indicators, I do want to just kind of point you to attachment A, where we have specific ideas included in here. So you can see, and we have, and I just want to state, just to kind of familiarize yourself a little bit with the language, the community indicators, as they're listed out in attachment A, are generally items that we are tracking and we're monitoring, but we don't necessarily have control over. But they help us to understand the environment that we're doing our work within. So, so for example, if you just look at the, I'm just the first page of attachment A, it says income diversity ratio, ratio of 80% percentile limit to 20% percentile limit, and population diversity. So those are things that are going to show you who are we serving, like who is it in San Jose, who is this community that we are working to provide services to. And then under performance measures, these are measures that actually reflect some of the work that we do have influence over. So, for example, housing public service utilization rate. So that's taking a look at within our programs that we're running, what is the utilization rate there? So those are just examples of what we're thinking about. And we wanted to provide this opportunity for you all to, see what we're thinking and provide feedback. We will be coming back to CED so that there will be a chance for this committee to again, have a conversation. And then our final recommendations will be in the budget, and that will be our proposed measures.
I see.
And so let me just make sure okay. So your next question was, how are they prioritized? Go ahead.
In terms of the kind of evaluation of the measures that were out there, the auditor documented, I think it was over 200 measures that the housing department produces annually.
That's why I'm asking. That's a lot.
And so we were very attuned to the need to prioritize those measures. And so some of the things that we asked of staff in the housing department to think through as they were proposing measures were things like, how often do you produce this data? Is it an annual measure? Is it a weekly measure? What's the time horizon for reporting? Is there a reliable data source? Second was equity. Is that measure disaggregatable by race or ethnicity or by income levels or other categories for disparities? We asked them to think about credibility, like do other agencies measure this topic? Is it evidence-based or part of a standard? Can we benchmark ourselves? The fourth thing we asked them to think about was scope. Is this measure representative, ways that matter to the program or population? And then finally was the relevancy. Is this aligned to an organizational or department or city council goal? And so having put those in front of housing department staff, that's how we generated the set of measures that are proposed in the attachment A.
That's really helpful, because it gives me a little bit more sort of like framework in like how you're doing this, because as I mentioned, you do a lot, and to sort of sift it is just can be daunting. So thank you for that. And then in terms of my question on who decides, it's something that will be coming to us again, as well as be able to come out there. I guess, I asked about indicators because, the community indicators and the performance measures are very broad. And I was just wondering, do you think that they're going to be a little bit more solidified as we move along, or
So as we move along, we will be providing finalized language on how we would like to have the measures shaped. And then once we enter into the actual budget document, we will also be working to provide data on what that information is. So each iteration will provide a little more detail.
okay. Are there things that you see that you might not be continuing to do? I mean, because it's just a lot that you're doing. And so I'm just wondering, is the thought that there might be some either collapsing or putting together of some things that make sense to? And
we are definitely looking at collapsing and just completely relooking at our performance measures themselves. Just for example, even the auditor pointed out there's a measure that relates to our loan portfolio that shows the delinquency rates for all of our different pieces of the portfolio. And for many years now, we have reported 0% delinquent every single year for many, many years. So it's not really a helpful, I mean, it's important for us to know that we don't, you know, we don't typically have delinquencies. But just by the nature of our work, a lot of times what we do is we enter into a workout and we find a solution like before something becomes delinquent or as an alternative to that. We're just a different type of lender. So that measure may not really be that helpful to you as, you know, policymakers and to the public. So what we're looking at is not including that measure anymore, but instead thinking more about even some of the equity measures that we haven't included in the past. How do you know, what is the ethnic diversity for the people who are actually receiving our services look like, and how does that compare to our community? Those are things that we would like to include that we haven't had in the past.
Thank you.
Anything else, Vice Mayor? No. Oh, okay, thank you. Councilmember Batra.
Thank you, Rachel, for the report or the proposed indicators. Good question on your table one. I'm just trying to understand it. Income diversity ratio, is this you're going to pick up from some source and just present it so that there's a consolidated report where we can look at all the things which are relevant, but you're really not going to spend too much time on trying to create this data, right?
Exactly. So one of the things that we incorporated into our process was the instance where we can pull an external data source to be the supplier of the numbers themselves. So for instance, when you cited that community indicator in particular, income diversity ratio, that's actually data that's generated by the census. And so we don't have to create or generate that data. We can actually pull it from a credible source already. And that's generally the case for all of the community indicators in this proposal, is that they tend to come from an external partner.
Thank you. So when you come back, Rachel, with the things which you're going to be proposing, if you will put it into two areas, the one where you would really need to do the work yourself, which means your staff is going to have to spend time and energy to figure it out, and the others which you are just going to take it from another source and present it in one place so that we can make sense in making those decisions. So that would be helpful, and that might help the vice mayor not to worry about your 200 indicators.
Yes, I just thank you for that question and suggestion, and I do want to just let you know that the way that we have it presented is actually organized in just that way. Yeah. So the community indicators, which are one category, are all coming from an external source. So we're using an external data source to provide that information. Okay. And then the performance measures, the second category, okay, those are ones where city staff will be working to provide the data for those measures. So it is broken into those two categories as suggested.
Okay.
And
Okay.
Councilmember Batra, I just want to clarify, so this is already articulated in Attachment A. Actually, with each community indicator and performance measure, we already detail what that source of data is.
Okay.
So we've already decided where we're going to get it.
Okay, that's good. Okay. The second one, and I'm going to try phrasing it to make some sense out of it. You know, in many discussions I had here from the dais as well as in-person meetings, a lot of our ability, how much influence we are able to have on these critical issues of homelessness and others, it's dependent on where the people came from, because the number of people who are still homeless after we help X number of people, if those people are continuing to come from somewhere other than San Jose, sure, it's United States, you can move. Is there anywhere we are going to have any data or indicator which is going to tell how many local people we help, how many people who are not local in a sense? We may help them because, and let me give you the context of why I consider. There are many reports which tell us that the most of the homeless and the other people tend to be local. okay? But when the last time the homelessness report was presented, unfortunately, the example which was chosen to detail happened to be about a person who moved here 2 days before, okay? That reinforced the feeling of the community that our homelessness population is not a homeless population which is local, and we keep drawing more people into our area because we are such a compassionate society. And I want to dispel that myth, if that is a myth. And so any help you can give us in that, it will help generate the community's compassion towards this activity.
Okay. So I just want to thank you for the question. I just want to again reiterate that we do have repeated sources of information that tell us that well over 80% of all the homeless residents that we are serving are our brothers and sisters here from San Jose. So I just want to reiterate, take that opportunity to remind ourselves that that's what we know. And so also, as we are developing performance measures for that area of work, we will definitely take that into consideration and consider if that is something that we can include in our performance measures, which would be something that is reported to you on an annual basis.
Yes, so I agree with the report, and I read many of them, and all of them claiming to be independent sources, and they're not partisan, not biased. So, but the problem, what I told you, is that there is a commonly believed thing, and then it got reinforced with the example we happened to put in there. So I want to have the community fully behind us in terms of doing the work, and they are. So I just need your help in terms of getting our reports to be such which detail examples like that showing some local people having the issues, and rather than somebody who moved from Georgia 2 days before.
Yeah, okay. I understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, do you want me to make the
Sure,
motion?
please.
Okay. I make the motion to accept the report.
I'll second.
Great, thank you. I just have a couple of questions, and thank you for the presentation. I'm curious about why outcome number 2 doesn't have any performance measures. It seems to be the only one that doesn't.
Yeah, good question, Councilmember Foley. So that is the outcome measure where we put a lot of the development services performance measures, and so because the housing department doesn't have a development service partner, that's the rationale for why we didn't include performance measures for that outcome.
So you'll get those from somewhere else?
From other departments in the CSA. So those tend to be performance measures from PBCE, Public Works, Fire, and OEDCA.
Okay.
Not the housing department.
Wonderful. I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. And I'm wondering, are we tracking how long it takes to build affordable housing? And if so, because I notice we get, all of us in our districts, we get information about an affordable housing project coming in, and then the residents start reacting, and we have community meetings, and we meet with the developer, and 3 years later, the project isn't built. So I'm wondering if you're tracking it, and if so, is there a metric that we can take a look at as to what that timeline is or what you're seeing?
That's a good question. And I think that we will take a look at that as we look at our measures for that group. So
I think that would be really helpful, because that's one area that we might be able to look for some efficiencies too, to help build affordable housing quicker. One of the reasons affordable housing is so expensive is because it does take a long time to get it built. And so if we can help facilitate that construction to occur quicker, then maybe we can save some costs on those doors, as we're hearing such a high cost. Also, how do you anticipate these revisions will improve our overall housing outcomes for our residents? How do you see what you're doing will actually build more housing or create more housing?
That's a good question, and I think there's a couple ways to think about it. First of all, I would say that as we develop performance measures and also take a look at the community indicators, what we have an opportunity to do is to be more specific about who we're serving and think about why we're serving whoever that is. It can help us inform future policy because I think the reality is with work in affordable housing, especially at this moment in time, we have greater need than we have resources. So how can we take a look at the impact of our work and make sure that it is impacting those who will have the greatest benefit? And we can make those choices, we can have that conversation because we have the data, and then we can target where the investment goes because we're going to have to make those choices, knowing that for quite some time, we're going to have more need than we have an ability to meet the need.
Thank you. Not just where the need is, but how we can speed up solving the need or reducing the need. I appreciate that. And then how are we going to measure success and effectiveness of our revised metrics? Will that be coming back to us the next time we see it?
Yeah, so the audit pointed out a couple recommendations. So 2 and 3 are coming to CED in April. And so those will be things or topics around like how we set targets for those. So all of the performance measures in the budget book are accompanied by a target for the next fiscal year and then a 5-year goal. And so those are a good opportunity for kind of defining success over a specific time frame that's built into the budget process.
Okay, that's wonderful. So the goal is to bring this back to CED so that then we can act on it with offering input so then you can influence the budget in those particular areas. Wonderful. I really look forward to that. Thank you, and thank you for the report. Councilmember Barter, you had follow-up questions?
No, not a follow-up question, it's a comment on the question which you asked about I've been studying this affordable housing build ever since I came on board, and what I've seen is from conception to occupancy is about 5 years. And when we had that cost second session, the study session, we went into the details of where the time went and its stack of activity. And there is about 6 months, which is somewhat in our control, and there's about a 1 year, which is a financing issue, and that one is much more beyond the control of the city. And we can work on influencing that, and which is what I'm trying to find the resources where we can influence the state and the IRS and all that, if they will be willing to listen to the financing model change. But those are the places we recognize that we can probably influence, and if we succeed, we can cut the window of the time down. Okay, so I just want to share that information with you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, let's vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Thank you for the presentation. Finally, we have a presentation on citywide residential anti-displacement strategy status report. Rachel, I believe you're kicking this off as well.
Yes, I am. So, again, thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Rachel Vanderveen, Assistant Director, and I am joined today by Kristen Clements, who is our Division Manager and is overseeing our policy work. So what we have to present to you today is an regular update on the housing's anti-displacement work. This is actually our 15th update that has come to this committee since we passed our strategy in fall 2020. And at this update, we're providing a preservation work plan. And this is something that was recommended by City Council last April that we develop. And so this is the first time that we have unveiled our preservation work plan, and we're just happy to be here today to provide that presentation to you. So with that, I will now be turning the presentation over to Kristen.
Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon, council members, Chair Foley and council members. Kristen Clements, I'm a division manager, overseeing all of our policy work at this point. So per City Council's direction, staff has been working on the top 4 priorities of the anti-displacement strategy. And as a reminder, the top 4 were to work on eviction protections, especially when it was passed during COVID, to create anti-displacement tenant preferences, to look into a proposal for a community opportunity to purchase program, which we did, and a lived experience seat implementation for the Housing and Community Development Commission. So reporting on ongoing eviction protection work has migrated to its own report to CED. You will hear this update in March. So today we will be focusing on reporting for the remaining top 2 priorities, the tenant preferences and the lived experience seat, and then respond to staff's proposed preservation work plan. Next slide. Thanks. So our accomplishments for tenant preferences were many, and we have a dedicated development officer, Minnie Nguyen, on our team, very talented, picking up the ball and moving this towards completion over the last few months. Again, to remind you, tenant preferences that mitigate displacement will give a better chance for applicants to affordable apartments who live in certain areas of the city. Staff has finalized the proposed programs, including implementation details. These were finalized with input from stakeholder outreach. We spoke to those who would be implementing the programs, the affordable housing property owners and property managers, and we had several meetings with them, and spoke to organizations that support renters who would be using the preferences. We also presented to the Housing and Community Development Commission, and their feedback is also going to be included in the memo as we bring it forward. So the next steps are to first complete an addition to the doorway portal of a geolocation function. The doorway portal is a way for applicants to apply for affordable apartments and hunt for them. And if they were to put their address into the portal, that we're creating a module that actually maps their address to whether they are eligible for one of the tenant preferences or not. So it's automated. Staff will also present the proposed programs to this committee next month, and we'll be asking for a cross-reference to City Council for March. And if City Council approves the programs, staff will immediately start producing support materials and holding more outreach and education sessions with the public and with users of the program. For the lived experience seat on the Housing and Community Development Commission, we had been working on this for quite a while, and so with this report, this item is going to be closed out. Ongoing, staff has been giving support to the lived experience commissioner and alternate, and going forward, that support will continue. We do have a lived experience alternate seat that is available, and so that seat will seek to be filled during the upcoming recruitment for seats on the commission in general. And staff is completing the confidential assessment that was scheduled just to check in with people privately and see how things are going and if there are any recommendations for improvements. And if so, Rachel, frankly, will be sharing that across over to the city manager's office and the city clerk's office to see if there are any lessons learned about logistics or about support that the members need. So again, this would be the conclusion of this work, and this item is now considered closed for purposes of this report. Per the City Council's direction, staff has created the preservation work plan, which is found in attachment A to this memo. So I wanted to give a diagram just to show you how do we get to this point. The preservation work plan has been derived from 2 City Council approved documents. First, the anti-displacement strategy, which was approved in fall 2020. That has 10 preservation work items in it. And the city's new housing element, approved this past June, which built on the anti-displacement strategy, and that has 15 preservation items in it, some of them repeats or expansions of what the AD strategy had. And in addition, staff proposes to add 2 work items to round out the preservation plan. So number 1, that's work per the City Council referral to explore additional types of entities that can do preservation other than community development corporations. And another item that was unintentionally omitted from the housing element, which was an exploration of whether city receivership could be used as a tool to take possession of severely unsafe buildings that continue to be severely unsafe year after year, as many other cities did during the last recession, 2008-2010 recession and foreclosure crisis. These 2 items that are additional, they are not in the housing element, but they are going to be integrated into the Housing Catalyst work plan. So this shows that it's part of the preservation work plan, but the official document that we'll be tracking to is the Housing Catalyst work plan, and that document is coming here to the committee next month. Thank you. This image you may remember from our 3Ps study session for council last September. Housing preservation work generally falls into these 4 objectives. First, we are trying to keep existing affordable housing affordable. And this pertains both to restricted affordable apartments, as we just discussed, but also our regulated rent stabilized apartments. We want to track how those rents are doing, and we can do that through our registry. Second, we want to ensure that existing housing remains in good physical condition, and so that we can preserve physical safety and soundness. And this is, again, for both restricted affordable, but also privately owned market rate buildings. And third, we want to support the acquisition and rehabilitation practice of existing housing properties so that we can, with city subsidy, create more restricted affordable housing. This takes both funding and support for entities that want to do this work. And fourth, all of these functions are strengthened by a foundation of supportive programs and policies. And also just a note, our original assessment when we created the anti-displacement strategy was that we needed to focus on the acquisition rehab and then other supportive programs and policies. We had programs in the other 2 categories, but those latter 2 were really weaker. So that's what we have been focusing on. And again, attachment A has the current preservation work plan. The objective, or the items on the work plan, they do fall in all 4 objectives. Thank you. So while the entire work plan is attached for your review, here are the major work items that staff is currently engaging on. First, we have held a competition and are in the process of evaluating grants for a nonprofit capacity building. And that was geared to encourage emerging affordable housing preservation partners. Second, we had put out, as Rosalind had noted, a notice of funding availability for acquisition and rehabilitation. And so that award is imminent as well. Third, we have been working for months on a soft story retrofit program to help older buildings that were built so that they're seismically not safe to be improved so that our community and our residents and our owners are all safe. Fourth is an example of one of those supportive programs and policies. The mobile home park general plan designation, that work has been underway also for months, and planning is due to complete in mid-2024 is the expectation. And finally, the last one has emerged as a current work item, the Housing Preservation Balance Report. This is a report that we're designing right now with the help of a consultant that is actually funded by the San Francisco Foundation for the next few months as part of our Partnership for the Bay's Future work. And this report will give us a way to take a data-informed approach to look at what is the need to preserve units from an affordability perspective. So it's going to be looking at restricted affordable, and it's going to be looking at rent-stabilized properties, figuring out where we are gaining and losing affordability, and also mapping our high displacement areas so that we can just have a better picture of what we need and where we need it. And so the next steps really are to prioritize our work that gets integrated into the Housing Catalyst work plan, and we'll be reporting out on that annually through the official Housing Catalyst reports. That is coming to this committee again next month, and that is going to then be cross-referenced to council. The Housing Catalyst work plan, again, just picks up the near-term items from the housing element and lays them out so we can focus on them. That council item will be combined together with the housing element annual performance report for this first year in the 6th cycle that we just completed. And again, our proposal is now to align fully our priorities with our existing work plans and just follow the timelines and the priorities set out in the Housing Catalyst work plan, which really reflects the housing element. That should be our driving force to determine what happens when. So with that, we are happy to answer any questions you may have, and thank you.
Great, thank you for that presentation. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak?
We have no public comment. Back to the committee.
Okay, then I'll go to Councilmember Torres.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. As we can imagine, right, creating anti-displacement strategies are important to ensure residents who have always called San Jose, right, are able to stay in San Jose, right, because they are the ones who make our city run. And in the neighborhood that I grew up in, which is the Guadalupe, Washington neighborhood, right, the promise of Google has made homes become really, really expensive. So the price of homes in that neighborhood have skyrocketed, right, leaving many residents displaced within their own community, and it's very unfortunate to see. And before the new year, my office received concerns from Japantown seniors living in a senior apartment complex where their rent was raised by 10%, right? And we all know seniors lived in fixed income, right? Their rent is going to go up 10% or 5%, whatever it is. By the way, thank you so much to the housing department who helped me let the folks who manage that property, let them know, say, nope, you can't raise rent by 10%. So thank you for that. Either way, like I was saying, right, rents increase, but our seniors, their income doesn't increase, right, because they live in a fixed income. So again, thank you for that. And that's unfortunately what we continue to see, right? Though our city is doing an incredible job of building both permanent supportive housing, affordable housing, tiny homes, and out-of-the-box thinking of project room keys, right? We still want to make sure that we maintain folks in their home, in their apartment, wherever they live, right? And so I do have a few questions. Can you please elaborate on the criteria used to identify areas with high likelihood of displacement for the anti-displacement preference, and how is this information determined?
Yes, thank you, Council Member, for that question. We are going to be relying on the UC Berkeley Urban Displacement Project data. They have taken a really thoughtful approach for probably 10 years, or last 8 or 10 years, as to how to quantify whether displacement is occurring or is likely to occur. Their methodology also focuses on lower income residents and very low income residents very deliberately. So it's a very helpful planning tool. And they update the data when census data is updated, so at least every couple of years, if not more frequently.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And this question is going to be probably a little bit controversial, not only to you all, but to the folks, if it ever comes to fruition, right? My question is there anything that precludes us from restricting rent increases for affordable housing apartments that have used city funding or Measure A money, et cetera?
Do you mind if I take this, Rachel? Actually, that is a really interesting question that we have been looking at, and we have been looking at it both for new projects that we support as well as our existing portfolio. This is a problem in our county and other higher cost counties where the median incomes have risen so dramatically. Unfortunately, it's not a problem. Well, fortunately for them, it is not a problem in all counties of the state. But there was legislation last year that would have tried to impose a rent cap on all properties, affordable properties that used tax credits. That legislation did not move forward. There is a really kind of wide disagreement between owners, even nonprofit owners, and tenants as to what reasonable increases look like, because the owners need to keep their properties afloat. And just like market rate properties, right, they're having insurance price increases, utility price increases, and folks are still coming out of the COVID era where losses were taken, right? So, but of course, the residents are not getting increases in their incomes to the same degree. So we actually are, that's one of the items in the Housing Catalyst work plan and the housing element, that we're going to be reassessing rent burdens and demographics of our own portfolio and bringing it back to see if there are any other policy considerations that we could do. Now, we could make statements for our newly funded deals, but we can't, we have contracts in place already for existing deals, and so we want to be really careful about how we do or do not impose on those.
Great. Thank you so much for the explanation. So, is that a yes?
There may be options, certainly with newer deals, to impose increased caps.
All right. And would it help if one of us on this dais or, in the greater council pushes that?
It is in our work plan, but yes, I mean, I think if there's somebody who's interested in kind of learning more and investigating different ideas with us, we would welcome that.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And as you can imagine, right, I have the First Church of Science in my district, along with Sylvie Towers, right? There's half of the Sylvie Towers project that is sitting vacant across the street from San Pedro Market, right? Is there any way that our city can take ownership for, say, staff housing, or just, using our city money to buy it and, use it for affordable housing purposes?
So I don't have details about that specific property. I think I would rather just talk in generalities.
Sure.
So at this moment in time, we just released a $50 million NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability, to fund the development of new affordable housing. And honestly, the $50 million is what we had to spend. So the thing is, let's say we were to buy a building, it could be 20 million. I don't know, I'm just throwing out numbers. We just have to make choices about how we spend the limited resources we have, right? So if we did want to buy a $20 million building, then we would have 30 million to do new development. So it's really about identifying the resources and deciding how we're going to prioritize the spending of that money.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then my last question is, what metrics or indicators are being used to measure the success of the anti-displacement strategy, and when can the community expect to see any type of tangible results?
Thank you, Councilmember. That is a great question that others have asked as well. I'm not sure that, I think we have to think through what that is. We're certainly, through these updates, tracking our work and making evident what work we have done to try to help this situation. I think, and of course, displacement is being affected by many different forces, not just what the city does. So, but I do think what we need to do is continue to figure out what any kind of studies are saying as to the population that is being lost. There was data that is recent that said through the Bay Area, especially, well, I think it was focused on South Bay, but that we did lose more lower income residents who were then in turn replaced with higher income residents, that the composition of our population did change over the last couple of years of COVID. Can we say COVID had a period? I'm not sure. But we want to continue to track those kinds of measures and see if we can get some more certainty around what our population is doing, which goes back to the performance measures conversation. We really want to be intentional about clarifying who our programs are serving. And again, make the best use of our very limited resources compared to the great need.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. Yeah. It is concerning when we do see, that's literally what you just described as gentrification, right? And yeah. we definitely want to keep our working class community here in the city of San Jose. And with that, I move to approve item D3.
Thank you. You saved me from asking you if you would do that for me. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, wonderful. Councilmember Ortiz.
First off, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to extend my appreciation to the staff for their very important report and dedicated efforts in developing the city's anti-displacement strategy, especially for efforts to preserve affordable housing, stabilizing neighborhoods, and preventing families from being uprooted from their homes and communities. All this is happening throughout the city, but there are districts that are seeing it at a much more higher significant level than others. It's good to see that the city is exploring various innovative approaches to acquire, rehabilitate, and build rental properties that can effectively prevent displacement in affected communities. I think I've spoken about this with code enforcement and planning, but we do have a lot of individuals who are not good partners. They're absentee, they don't respond to the concerns of their tenants, and a lot of that blight is pushed on to the surrounding community. So when it comes to, forgot the word that you said, but when you take the property away from absentee landlords and manage it in a way that is in the community's best interest, receivership, I think it was? Receivership, there you go. I'm very much interested in that because I think we need to award our good property owners, but also make sure that those who are bad actors are held accountable. I'm also glad that the city is focusing on different ways to utilize entities such as community development corporations, which I know we used to have one in Moxa back in the day, as well as economic development corporations and other similar organizations that can serve as investment vehicles for preservation. I know that in the Mission, they have Mission neighborhood centers and various. A lot of this infrastructure is built up in other cities, so we know that it works. So I'm looking forward to us making sure that that infrastructure is developed here in our city. And of course, I'm excited that we're progressing on the anti-displacement tenant preference and neighborhood tenant preference, both of which are policies that my residents are really energized about and been very vocal about. You know, we've built, you know, Quetzal Gardens. There was a great community movement around that structure, and it's great, but it didn't house anybody from the actual neighborhood. And we should still house those individuals who are vulnerable. But I think by providing tenant preference that is directly combating, you know, these movements of gentrification that are happening in our neighborhoods. You know, I'm truly confident that these efforts will go a long way to creating a more equitable and sustainable community, because I truly believe it's housing right? We can't address the housing crisis or the homeless crisis just by building housing and even affordable housing, right? Because, as you mentioned, I think earlier, I don't know if it's 75%, but the majority of homeless people are tenants, are individuals who are falling behind today on their rent, falling behind on their car payments. That's something I've experienced as a renter. And so, you know, I know other individuals outside that real day-to-day economic pressures, you know, they could think, oh, people are being bussed here, or, you know, think of these conspiracy theories of why we have so much homeless. But for working class people, we know that these are brothers and sisters who work at the grocery store or worked at Walmart or worked at Target, and got into a car accident, couldn't fix their car, and then they fell behind on their rent, and boom, they're unfortunately under a freeway overpass. So I'm really excited about this, and I wanted to see, because you did mention this was going to come before the council, right? The preservation strategy.
Yes, the elements of the preservation strategy are already in the Housing Catalyst work plan.
Okay.
So it's a part of that work plan, and now we're going to add the two that were not in there to the Housing Catalyst work plan. So all of the items will be in there, they just won't be segmented out into their own list.
But we're going to have a discussion about this on the city council. I thought you said that, or no? About the anti-displacement efforts?
Yes, I mean, the anti-displacement strategy will continue to be its own document. And actually, one of the items in the work plan in the housing element work plan is to redo the anti-displacement strategy, which is take off the stuff we finished, add the next items into it. So that will continue to live. And then the preservation items will be called out in the Housing Catalyst work plan, which comes to this committee next month and then council the following.
Okay. No, that's great. It'd be great for us to, I know you're doing research on all these topics, but just if we could paint out the picture of how the affordability crisis is actually displacing people. I think people just hear displacement and gentrification and they're like, oh, what is that? You know, they could throw out these terms, but like showing the number of how many people are being displaced. I think a couple of weeks ago, there was, on the agenda, there was an item that showed like 17,000 Latinos were displaced. Like those are that's like the type of real hard data that, you know, when myself or Councilmember Torres are raising these concerns, we need to make sure that other council members know, because we're not making this up. You know, this isn't, we're not, what is that? The sky is falling. We're not like the little hen or the little chicken, right? This is actually something that's impacting our residents, and if we could see some active data around that, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Kamei.
Thank you. One of the things that is really important to me and my area in District 1, considering that I have so many apartment units in D1, the anti-displacement program is critically important as it relates to the soft story retrofit program. And I will say, there's a lot of fear that people will need to be displaced in order to implement that program. Now, there are circumstances where to do a retrofit, you do not have to displace. People do not know that. And I would really like to follow up on further information on how I could bring that information to the community so that they're not in panic or fear. I know that when the soft story retrofit program has come before us at the council, there was talk of making things mandatory. That also creates a lot of fear. And so I want to kind of get ahead of it, because when you mix both anti-displacement and then the retrofit program, it becomes a bigger issue. So I would like to create a lot more clarity on what is and is not going to happen, because if it's not necessary to move people out, then we should be very, very upfront about that. And I think that that will help us in the long run. The other thing is that in terms of anti-displacement, to me it just seems, because of the costs of this area, that we're never going to get ahead. And so as we think about what some of the solutions are, I think we're going to have to think a little bit differently, because unless we put a cap, as has been suggested by Councilmember Torres, and that's really difficult because costs continue to go up, right? I think that we need to have a conversation about that and what other new tool that we can put in the toolbox. Because I think that you can go around this and go around this again and again, and then you have the issue of gentrification happening. So I think we need to have, sort of like a deeper look at how do we make it effective to, have an anti-displacement program that can be a little bit more long-term. And I know that we're lucky to have some funding available to do something. But I think that perhaps we need to take a step back and say, well, is this the only way, the only path? Are there other paths? Can we step back and do something else? And I don't know what that is at this point in time, but I think that if we don't ask the question, we'll never get there, because doing the same thing is easier than trying to come up with creative ways to be able to solve this problem. I mean, it's huge. And we see a lot of families, especially families. I mean, one of the reasons why the schools are losing enrollment is because it's so hard to live in this area. If you're single, it's a little bit easier. It's yourself or you and your partner, but it's really hard. And so I ask you to think broader. And certainly it's a conversation that I think we need to have. So thank you for the report.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And we'll be happy to work with you on soft story information. I think I saw Rosalind may want to comment directly, but you were correct that our consultant has told us that most scopes of work will not require any renters to move out, even temporarily. So I don't know, Rosalind, if you wanted to add to that at all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm actually going to send out the latest presentation that we've provided on the draft soft story retrofit program. To your point, there is a lot of misinformation and fear, as you suggested. And this committee actually directed staff last April to actually do a lot more community engagement with both residents and the housing providers, and we have been doing that for the last probably 5-6 months. We recently just had a meeting with the housing providers 2 weeks ago, giving them detailed information, and I am actually going to share this with all of the committee members, because we would appreciate your help in getting the correct information out about the program.
Yeah, I think it'd be very interesting to be able to, for those council members who would like to have something in their community so that people understand and know what it is and what it is not. because I know that I'd be happy to host something to be able to alleviate a lot of the fear that I'm experiencing with some of my residents who think that they're going to be kicked out of their apartments. So I think that that would be very helpful in terms of not only for us, but also to provide that service to the community.
I'll just add about the soft stories that it's on our work plan to come before us in March for a discussion. So we'll have a more vibrant discussion on that point. But to your point, Vice Mayor, we are getting a lot of comments from people who think they're going to have to leave in order for the retrofit to occur, and that really isn't the case. The work will be done in the carport and they're not lifting up the building or anything. They're really putting in support beams around the carport area to keep the building safe. And frankly, it's better that those improvements be done, because a collapsing building would be a worse situation during an earthquake. Okay, anything else, Vice Mayor?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Batra.
Thank you very much for working on these policies, and I'm really glad to see the 2 items which you have there. The staff is developing 2 tenant preferences. Both of those get to the point which we were making earlier. Both of those, you are trying to help the people who are local with those definitions. And we know that every cent we spend on it is going to be helping the people who have lived in San Jose, who deserves to live in San Jose, who built City of San Jose. So I'm glad that you got that preferences going. Got 100% of our support on that one. And thanks for getting that. Regarding the soft story, I've been following it up with Chris Burton on that one. And when the biggest concern are 2, obviously the one where the displacement, but the second is also that if we make it mandatory, the cost for that one is a phenomenal amount of the cost. Most of the people, the mom and pop who own those kind of properties, they don't have that kind of a cash. Plus, there are about 3,500 potential properties which are likely to require this thing. Some may not, but 3,500 is the initial number. If suddenly we ask those 3,500 people to go and get the structural engineer to do your design, we only have few structural engineers in the city. We're not going to be able to find enough structural engineers to get the job done. So I have worked with Chris on it, that when we come up with this plan, we come up from the practicality of how we can get the job done and who pays for it, how much does get paid by somebody, preserving the displacement angle. So those 2 are both hand in hand, and they need to be worked. And hopefully the report we are going to see in March will be addressing those concerns which I raised with Chris in my one-on-one discussions. So good job on this program, and especially everything you're doing on the local preference and the tenant preference. That makes me extremely happy that you're helping the right people in the right way.
Great. Thanks very much, Councilmember.
I just have one question regarding the receivership process. That seems very interesting to me. There are a lot of blighted properties in the area that may be vacant, that the owners don't seem to care one way or the other, but the neighbors complain about the trash, the debris, the attractive nuisance. So how does the receivership process work?
Thanks, Councilmember. I have to say I'm not an expert on this because we haven't started doing that deep dive. This does roll up to the Code Enforcement Division of PBCE, and it is a right that the city has in the municipal code. And then I think the question is, do we ever make use of this right? Under what circumstances would we ever consider it? And how would that evidence be brought forward so that it was a compelling case? And of course, people shouldn't fear that their property rights would get taken willy-nilly, that this is only for very extreme circumstances. And so I think all of that conversation is possible to have, and then, all bounded by legally, what is it appropriate for the city to be doing?
I appreciate that. I think this is, opens up a further conversation for me and perhaps Johnny or someone in the attorney's office. With that, I see no other hands raised. Let's vote. Thank you. That motion carries. This concludes the regular portion of our meeting. Now we move to public forum.
We have one public speaker card submitted for Lillian. You can please make your way down to the podium. You will have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
I'm here just to give a public testimony. I'm a senior. I'm in a senior housing development. When I moved in, my rent was a certain amount, and in 2 years that I've lived there, my yearly contract went to month. My rent has considerably gone up. Every yearly contract becomes now monthly. It's no longer a yearly contract. You have to recertify within a certain time. And your rent has to be 2.5 times your income. So I therefore am a substitute teacher, work on weekends with a special needs brother, and I'm currently looking for a third job so that I don't become displaced. When you talk about affordable housing, I really wonder, what does affordable housing mean to seniors when 40% of our homeless are seniors? It is a scary time to be renting in San Jose. I live in Mr. Torres's district, but I border Mr. Ortiz's district, and I totally believe in legislation being passed that puts a cap on tax, on rents. However that is to be done, that needs to be pushed, because no matter what we say here, we all know that costs continue to go up, and who's the burden of that? Myself, because I have to pay that extra. And honestly, there is nothing worse than knowing your situation is precarious, and it's very expensive to move, as we know. But again, Mr. Torres pointed out that we are all on fixed incomes. We should be when we're nearing 70, but I continue to work and probably will have to. And the other thing is, we talked about all these housing issues today, market rates and impacts on community and gentrification and who.
Thank you. That concludes the
Thank
2
you.
minutes. Yes. And then we will now head to Zoom for... Welcome. We'll now head to Zoom for Dina Hayes. You may speak.
Hi, thank you. My name is Dinah, and I just wanted to bring up the important piece of pet ownership when developing any housing strategy or support programs. And I'd specifically like to understand what measures are in place for those facing eviction who are pet owners and or facing eviction due to pet ownership. Pets are an integral part of many households, and they provide companionship and emotional support. And individuals and families with their pets are going to be facing unique challenges, and already are, when it comes to housing stability, and even more so in San Jose. Is there a possibility of incorporating prevention services for pet owners within our housing support initiatives? And I would also like to ask what steps are taken to address the needs of individuals and families facing eviction specifically due to pet ownership. I have dealt with a number of those people just in the past few weeks, and it seems like they are increasing, and there is very little support that is available to them. I would also like to ask of what prevention services or support programs are in place to assist pet owners in maintaining housing stability, such as spay and neuter or rehoming of pets, and what types of eviction support is currently offered to individuals and families with pets that could potentially be added. And would ask you to take into consideration the number of people in households with pets and what is going to happen to those people when they are evicted and their pets, and they try to find additional housing. Thank you.
Jean Dresden.
Hello, my name is Jean Dresden. Several of you know me as a park advocate, but I also work in the areas of pet rescue and with the animal shelter. I was in Kelly Park walking and ran across a woman who was standing at the creek looking for her kittens. And these were kittens actually she had released. She released them because her own pet cat had accidentally become pregnant, and her landlord threatened her with eviction if she kept them. So she goes and she looks for them regularly there. She picked that location because she thought the homeless might take care of them and feed them. She had an accidental pregnancy because there is no low-cost spay-neuter available in San Jose, and there's unlikely to be for a long time. When she went to try to find it on the private market, she discovered it was about $300 that she didn't have because she is a senior on fixed income. Her cat is still unfixed, and she still has no choices available. So if her cat gets out again, she's going to have another accidental litter that will be added to the cats in Kelly Park. The city already has a grant to a nonprofit whose job is to trap cats in our parks, including those along both the Coyote and the Guadalupe River. So we're paying to have that done rather than intervening before the kittens are being born. She faced eviction. I'm wondering if the anti-eviction program could include a component of intervention before these people are evicted and before accidental kittens end up in the creek. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the committee.
Thank you. We stand adjourned.